Koi fish are some of the most spectacular and easiest to draw and can be either flat or three-dimensional. If you want a three-dimensional masterclass, just write to me and I'll record one for you. So I'm taking a cardboard canvas and painting the background thickly without any water. And I'm not worrying about getting the paint perfectly mixed in. You see, I'm piling it up and I'm mixing it with a brush to prime it. Now the thing is, the smaller your work, the less you need to prime with epoxy resin. The larger your work, the more you need to prime the canvas and the canvas on the cardboard with epoxy resin on both the back and the front to prevent it from warping. I'm priming it on the back side, and on the front side, I will also cover it with epoxy resin. Let the acrylic dry, then we can move on to the pattern. So guys, the base is dry, you can create the first layer. You can also create the first layer with small stones with a bit of depth. That is, you can adapt this pattern however you like. As you wish, I'll demonstrate this simplest method, but you can make it more complicated. Add as much as you like. I mix thick deluxe resin from RainPro, by the way. Use the promo code TERIUM for a 10% discount. Once the acrylic is dry, please place it directly onto many cups. Check the level to ensure your base isn't skewed. Now I apply it extra thick like a finish. Look, I apply the resin with a big blob. I observe how it behaves. Distribute it carefully on the surface. It's very important, guys, that you carefully, gently spread the resin so it sits right in a blob. I add literally 5, 10 grams you can. At the gouging stage, it can be more, it can be 15. Now let's color this resin. Just be very careful. Need to color it thin, milky white, but not dense, guys. It's literally milky, milky. Also look closely. It seems more saturated in volume, but I think it's enough. One more drop and... This technique doesn't work with live resin. What does it mean? Live resin that has just been mixed, you need to wait for the resin to gain viscosity. In a thick resin, I don't have to wait long. It's in the resin, which is medium, on the liquid. Unfortunately, straight, it won't work clearly. Here are 2 more poured in. I already have a pitch already, just hot, hot, mixed well and pour. Now, guys, the second moment, which is very... To make this technique, you need to apply a layer that is not very thick, but enough to make your resin spread like a bun over your entire surface. You know how you apply a finish to your product. There should be such a layer, and of course it will flow out of the edges, and this is normal. And from this, your particles will diverge even better. So now remove the bubbles with quick movements. We do not let the burner stand in one place. That's when your resin is already like honey. Here I have it right now. We start dripping drops. Wipe the spatula clean. Let us have it will be and dig the drops as you want in whatever order you want in. Thickness. So I don't want to make circles, but you know, just like there are highlights on the water, slowly, this is such a process of meditation. Carefully, take your time. The most important thing is that your resin is infused. Otherwise, all these veins, unfortunately, will disappear if your resin is alive. So be careful. Please let the resin brew, gain viscosity. Unfortunately, guys, if your resin is still active, it'll disappear. So please be careful and let the resin set properly. Give it time to thicken up. Like this, you can even add a bit more. Pour in some drops. Yeah, that's how I like it better. And you see, you can create an uneven bottom, as I mentioned before, with pebbles. You can draw something at the bottom to add depth. It's really up to your imagination. Now carefully remove the bubbles. Just be sure not to rush the resin. And by the way, here's another option. You can work in several layers. First, let the initial layer of the picture dry, then add the second. You can also, if you notice the resin is still a bit fluid, gently guide it to give it direction. But I actually like how it turned out, so I'll leave it as is. I won't press too hard on the resin here. It's drying now. Next, we'll be working on the sunflowers. So grab your palette, some thick acrylic paint, and brushes. For this part, I'll be using a thin, round brush, but make sure it's well trimmed and sturdy. I'll cut in a circle using manicure scissors. Now, epoxy resin isn't like canvas. It doesn't absorb water. So I only use water to clean the brush, or if I need a completely transparent acrylic finish. Whether you're drawing fish, coral, or any sea creature, or really anything on land, always remember to add a shadow. This will show that you're a real pro and that you know what you're doing. Things like proportions, depth, and the golden ratio, all these fancy terms. You'll come across as knowledgeable if you add shadows. I don't even understand half of what I just said, but I do know that everything looks way cooler and more professional with shadows. So we'll definitely add some using light, slightly shaky movements to show the direction of the fish, the direction of our beautiful redheads. You can decide for yourself which ones will be swimming from left to right and which ones from right to left. The key is to keep the shadows consistent on one side. Or for instance, if the sun is somewhere in the middle there. Just imagine how the shadow is distributed, yeah? Then we'll use dense acrylic to create the shape, form the body of our fish. We're drawing what looks like a squinted eye, kind of elongated, to which the tail is attached. As for the fins, I'm not drawing the ones on the tail right away. We'll add those later. They'll be more transparent and have a different shade. Right now, the main thing is to create a solid base on which we'll draw our fish. So, no gaps, nice and dense. We're using pure white to draw the shape of our fish. The shadow is our guide here. This will give the impression of depth, as if your artwork really knows what it's doing. The fish appear to be somewhere above the bottom level. They've risen a bit above the water level. So if you want the bottom effect to be less pronounced, you can make the shadow shorter and not so far from your fish's body. I've also decided to add one last fish that looks like it's swimming away. You can actually create many of these fish. By the way, they rarely swim alone. They usually swim in schools, and each one is super unique with its own individual pattern. For my fish, I've chosen orange, yellow, red, and brown. I'll be mixing these colors to create spots. Make sure we've applied a solid base color and let it dry on our base layer. I'm blending the orange, blending it like I would with raspberry. I'm mixing orange, white, and I'm adding a bit of yellow and making spots. Now watch closely how my brush moves. Even in fast motion, you can see I'm not painting flat on the canvas. I'm imagining my fish already has a body, and I'm working around it. Think of it like drawing a sausage and shading its sides. See, I'm curving the spots, making some elongated here and there. They're twisted, not straight or even. I hope that makes sense. Now, this is the only time you need to dilute the acrylic with water. I'm adding shadows, but only on one side. Notice if you start with the left fish on the left side, each one has its own shadow, but only on one side. Now I'm using pure acrylic to draw the spine and add little dots for the eyes. As you can see, I'm using a very relaxed technique without too much precise detailing. If you want a more lifelike detailed drawing, grab any photo of fish from Pinterest or something similar. From Google, you can print it out or open it on a tablet. You can really take your time to sit and draw. There's plenty to work on. There's so much to draw. Scales, shadows, all kinds of gills, fins. It's worth every minute. So please, if this is exactly what you want, I actually prefer it to be visible, that it's a drawing, to convey a mood, to make it clear that there's depth, brightness, and some kind of exotic story. But it's still a drawing, not a photograph. I love these kinds of drawings. Now I'm using dark brown to draw spots, and I've mixed a sort of sea shade with gray and white. I've drawn sea waves in gray, and I've detailed the fins as if they're wet in the water, because they are wet in the water, right? I've also mixed in some light brown, and I've also drawn the eyes somewhere in the lower part of the body. I've added the fish's lips, and whiskers. That's also very important. It's crucial to draw the spine, but only after everything else is done, with clean lines. I painted the fins on the spine and the very tips of the tails with a dense white color, then covered it all with acrylic matte varnish. I let it dry thoroughly, and then I mixed the resin. While the varnish is drying, I apply a medium viscosity epoxy resin, and voila, the bobbers are ready. Using the drip method and some fish, here are the carps I created on another panel. I recorded a lesson for Boost Your Patreon on how to achieve this effect with alcohol inks, and I also added some little fish. Have a great day, everyone. Not a speck of dust in sight. Bye-bye.